The wind tore through the cottonwood trees like it was hunting something alive. It screamed over the broken ridgeline and crashed into the valley, throwing dry snow against rotted fence posts, half-buried wagon wheels, and the bent ribs of a barn that had not stood right since the day her husband died. The sound was not just noise. It felt angry, sharp, and personal, like the land itself had turned against her. Kneeling in the snow beside that collapsed barn was a woman who should not have been there at all. She was 8 months pregnant, her belly heavy and tight, her breath coming in short clouds. Her knees were numb, her hands were red and cracked. She clawed through splintered boards and frozen hay as if she were digging through a grave. No one was watching. No one was coming. Everyone had already decided she would be dead before winter truly began. Her name was Clara Holt. She was 26 years old and a widow. Her husband, Luke Holt, had been a horseman and a barn framer. He had died the past summer when a beam cracked loose during a lightning storm and crushed him beneath it. The neighbors said it was bad luck, rotten wood, bad timing, a cruel twist of fate. What they did not say out loud was that the bad luck stayed behind with the woman he left and the life growing inside her. Clara was alone with a 2-year-old boy named Jeremiah, who still cried for his father in his sleep. The wagon train had moved on weeks ago. The river crossing froze early. This stretch of wilderness had emptied itself of people, leaving behind only silence, snow, and the broken bones of her husband's last dream. The barn had collapsed inward. The east wall was gone, sunk deep into the frozen ground. Even the coyotes would not den there. But the south wall still leaned, stubborn and crooked, and beneath it ran an old feed trench lined with stones laid in a rough half-oval. That trench was the only thing that had not shifted since Luke died. Clara stared at it in the pale morning light, her teeth chattering, the baby kicking hard beneath her ribs. Jeremiah slept nearby under her coat, curled small and thin. She looked at the trench the way a general might look at the last piece of high ground, because it was the only thing left that had not failed her. The plan did not come from books. She had never read much beyond the family Bible. It did not truly come from Luke either, though he had once built a dugout shelter for a neighbor that stayed warm through a cold snap. The plan came from desperation, from watching how the snow piled against the trench instead of over it, from realizing that the wind skimmed the ground but ripped apart anything that stood tall, from a deep feeling in her gut that down was safer than up. She started digging that day. The earth was frozen hard in most places, but beneath the collapsed barn the soil was softer. Years of hay, waste, and animal heat had kept it rich and just warm enough below the frost line. She used broken boards as levers. She pulled stones from the trench by hand. She dug until her fingers bled and her back screamed. She stopped only to feed Jeremiah from a small tin of dried beans she kept tied under her coat. She heated them over a weak fire made from manure chips and fence scraps. When Jeremiah saw her hands, raw and red, he cried. Clara did not. She kept moving. The sky promised more snow, and she knew time was not on her side. By nightfall, she had carved out a space no larger than a wagon bed. She lined it with broken timber and packed mud into the cracks, pressing it in with a wooden plate she had flattened on a stone. It was not pretty. It was not safe. But it was something. In the wild, something could mean the difference between waking up and never waking at all. That night she collapsed beside her son. They wrapped themselves in what was left of an old horse blanket. Her stomach cramped from the strain. Her fingers were too swollen to bend properly, but the wind did not reach them. The dirt pressed close around the frame like a womb, and for the first time in weeks the cold did not sink into her bones. She dreamed of Luke. He was not standing like he used to. He was kneeling beside her, running his rough hands over the beams she had sunk into the earth. He did not speak. He only nodded once and smiled the way he used to after finishing a hard job. She woke to the soft patter of snow falling on the broken barn roof. She knew she had, one day, maybe two, before the storm came down hard. The next morning she dragged the last usable boards over the pit and laid them flat across the top. She weighted them with rocks. It was not a roof, but she knew that if she packed snow over it thick enough it would insulate like ice. She had seen fox dens survive winter that way. Heat stayed low. Cold stayed out. Her body fought every movement. Jeremiah cried most of the morning, hungry and cold. She gave him the last of a cracked jar of honey, watching him lick it from her fingers with a hunger that scared her. She did not eat that day. By dusk, the snow began. It started soft, gentle, then thickened as if the sky itself had torn open. Clara screamed into the wind as she dragged the final planks into place. She packed snow by hand, by foot, by anything she could use. Her fingers stopped bleeding because the cold closed the wounds. Her breath wheezed like a broken pump. When she finally ducked inside with Jeremiah in her arms, the wind howled over them instead of through them. Her son slept. She did not. She lay awake staring at the faint glow of a tallow candle and the shadow of a roof she prayed would hold. Every sound made her flinch. Every gust made her brace, but the roof held. When sleep finally took her, her last thought was simple. If it holds 3 nights, it might hold 10. She did not know that someone had seen the smoke that morning. She did not know that far across the ridge, a settler had stood still with his coffee in hand, staring at what he thought was a trick of the eyes, smoke rising not from a chimney, but from the earth itself. The morning broke white and nearly silent, the kind of silence that warned instead of comforted. Clara woke stiff and sore inside the buried shelter. The thick snow muted every sound, leaving her unsure whether it was dawn or dusk. Jeremiah lay curled beside her, his breathing shallow. His cheeks were flushed, not with warmth, but with fever. She pressed her hand to his skin and felt fear tighten in her chest. The candle had burned down to a stub. She pulled her coat tighter and rocked him gently, staring at the blackened wick like it might offer answers. She had no firewood left. Her only heat now was their bodies and the packed earth around them. Hope did not make food appear. It did not break fevers. She whispered to the baby inside her, telling it to wait, telling it they were not ready. Life did not listen. She crawled out into the ruined barn, kicking away snow that had collapsed into the opening overnight. The valley lay ghost-like before her, trees glazed in ice, fence posts nearly gone. Not a bird, not a track, just the stillness of winter claiming ground. She limped toward the old garden gully, snow up to her knees, using a broken rake handle to probe ahead. There had been turnips buried there weeks ago. She had covered them with straw and snow, hoping the cold would preserve them. Digging bare-handed, she found 6. 6 turnips felt like a miracle. She pressed one to Jeremiah's lips when she returned. He stirred and sucked weakly. It was enough to keep him awake, enough for her to keep going. The flame burned dim but steady. She told Jeremiah a story about his father and a gentle horse. Her voice broke. She did not finish. 2 more days passed like that. Quiet, slow. Survival measured in breaths and bites. She scratched marks into the mud wall to count the days. On the 13th day, she heard footsteps. They were slow, careful, human. A cough followed. Then a voice, rough but real. "Hello, anybody down there?" Clara held her breath, heart hammering, unsure if this sound meant rescue or ruin. Clara did not answer right away. She pressed her ear to the roof beam and held still, her breath shallow, her hand tight around the sharpened stick she kept near her side. The voice came again, closer now, careful. "I saw smoke. Thought maybe my eyes were lying to me." Smoke. So it had been seen. She moved slowly, easing herself toward the opening, every muscle tight. When she pushed up through the snowbank, she came out wild and sharp, hair loose, eyes sunken, coat pulled tight over her belly. She looked more like a trapped animal than a woman. The man staggered back a step. "Easy," he said quickly, lifting both hands. "I'm not here to take anything." He was middle-aged, thin from hard living. A rifle hung across his shoulder, but he did not touch it. His coat was patched, his beard streaked with gray, his face half wrapped in wool. "You alone?" Clara asked. Her voice was rough from disuse. He nodded. "Cabins about 3 miles up the ridge. I was cutting trail for my snare lines when I saw the smoke rising out of the ground. Thought it was a trick at first." His eyes dropped to her belly, then lifted again. "Careful. They said everyone cleared out of this valley. I didn't, she said. I can see that. His name was Albi Grant. He said he had been trapping these woods since before the war. Said his wife had died 2 winters back, and he wasn't afraid of ghosts. But smoke coming from under snow nearly sent him running. He reached into his pack slowly, watching her the whole time, and pulled out food. A strip of dried rabbit, 2 smoked trout wrapped in canvas. For the boy, he said, and you. Clara did not step forward. She did not thank him right away. She just stared, as if afraid the food might vanish if she believed in it too hard. When she finally took it, her hands shook. He did not stay long, said he would come back in a day if he could. When he disappeared into the white, she stood there longer than she meant to, wondering if she had imagined him. But he came back. 2 days later, he returned with bandages, salt, and a jar of lard, told her to rub it on her cracked hands. She wept then, quietly, her face turned away. It's not charity, he said, just neighbors. On the 3rd visit, he brought cornmeal and wood chips. He stayed longer that time, watched the way she moved, slow and careful. Noticed how close she was to labor, how weak Jeremiah still looked. I'll come back with something for the birth, he said. If it comes early. Clara did not answer. She knew it would not be an if. That night her water broke. There was no warning, no easing into it. Just a sharp pain across her back and a warm rush that left her shaking. Jeremiah whimpered beside her. The candle flickered. She screamed. No one heard. No one but the owls and the child forcing its way into the world. She braced her back against the packed wall and tore open her coat. Sweat poured from her even as frost clung to the air. She bit down on her knuckle to keep from breaking her teeth. Then came movement above. A thud. A shout. I heard it. Alby's voice cut through the snow. I'm here. Relief hit her so hard it almost knocked her unconscious. He tore open the roof, snow spilling down, his face pale as he dropped inside. He did not waste time on words. He rolled up his sleeves and went to work. He had never delivered a child before, but he moved like a man who had pulled calves from mud and dragged bodies from rivers. When she screamed, he told her to breathe. When she sagged, he called her name until she came back. The labor was long and cruel. The baby turned slow. Clara passed out once. Alby thought she was gone. Then she gasped back to life and pushed again. The cry that followed was sharp and angry and real. A girl. He wrapped her in wool and placed her on Clara's chest. Clara stared at the tiny, furious face and laughed and cried all at once. For a long moment, nothing else existed. The days that followed blurred together. Clara barely left the dugout. Her body ached in places she could not name. She nursed the baby with cracked lips and an empty stomach. Alby came every day now, no longer pretending he was just passing by. Once he brought a shard of glass. You deserve to see her, he said. She named the baby Ruth. Jeremiah's fever broke slowly. Alby brought herbs to boil for steam. Clara did not ask questions. She trusted his hands now. On his 4th visit after the birth, Alby stayed longer. The storms were worsening. He said he might not be able to come back for a while. He gave her matches, only 5. If anything happens, he said, look for the cross tree by the rock bluff. I'll see the flare. That night, the wind returned, louder than before. Snow filtered through cracks in the roof. Clara packed mud into the seams and whispered to Ruth, telling her they were not breaking tonight. 3 days later, the wolves came. The first howl was far, then closer, then many. Clara froze, Ruth nursing at her breast. She set the baby down gently and took the sharpened stick. The snow near the entrance shifted. A snout pushed through, gray and steaming. She screamed and struck. The wolf yelped and vanished, but others waited outside. She dug, not down this time, but back. She clawed through dirt and roots until her fingers burned. Jeremiah helped, silent, eyes wide. She broke through into an old feed chute. They crawled inside and hid. The wolves tore into the dugout hours later. Clara held her breath until her chest burned. At dawn, the pack moved on. The shelter was destroyed, the roof gone, the walls torn, but her children were alive. Clara did not cry. She gathered what she could and began again. She dug deeper this time, carving sideways into the bank behind the barn. She remembered Luke's words about cold and earth. She went low. She went tight. When the second storm came, the shelter held. She lay awake with both children pressed to her chest, listening to the storm rage above them, and believed for the first time that they might live. She did not yet know how far this would go. The storm lasted 2 days. It did not howl the way the first one had. This storm pressed down instead, heavy and patient, like it meant to stay forever. Snow piled thick over the shelter roof. The earth groaned softly. The wind moved above them, but it could not find a way inside. Clara lay awake through most of it, her arms wrapped around Jeremiah and Ruth, her body curved over them like a shield. She did not pray for rescue anymore. She prayed for holding, for the roof to keep holding, for her children to keep breathing. When the storm finally broke, the silence that followed was so deep, it felt unreal. She waited a long time before crawling out. The barn was nearly gone now, crushed flat under snow and broken beams. Blood stained one post near the old trough. She did not know whose blood it was. She did not stop to wonder. The cold was sharper than before, the kind that cut clean and deep. She moved anyway. She salvaged what little remained. A cracked tin pot, her husband's old belt, a small oilskin pouch with a dried flower Luke had once pressed into her hand. Most of the firewood was buried or scattered. The first shelter was ruined beyond repair, so she did not rebuild it. She carved deeper into the bank behind the barn, using the old feed trench as her guide. She dug sideways, not down, remembering Luke's voice from years ago. Cold cannot pull what it cannot reach. Go low, go tight. She worked through pain that no longer had names. Her hands shook, her back burned. Jeremiah helped when he could, carrying twine, smoothing dirt, holding Ruth when Clara needed both hands. He did not ask about his father anymore. Something inside him had gone quiet and steady. She sang while she worked, old hymns, broken songs from her girlhood. Her voice cracked, but it kept the fear from growing too loud. When the next storm came, the shelter was ready. The roof was layered with boards, sod, and snow. The walls were packed with mud and straw. She sealed the seams with animal fat melted into rags. Smoke slipped out through a hidden vent made of stacked stone and moss. The storm screamed overhead. Inside, they lived. Days passed, then more days. Food grew thin. She boiled bark, chewed snow, shared everything she had between 3 small bodies. Ruth cried often. Jeremiah slept light, but without fear. And then, one morning, she saw smoke again. Not hers. She climbed carefully out of the shelter and scanned the ridge. A thin line of smoke rose near the cross tree by the rock bluff Albi. She did not waste time. She packed Ruth against her chest, took Jeremiah's hand, and moved. Each step hurt. Her body screamed for rest, but she did not slow. She found him, collapsed near the tree, his leg twisted badly, his face gray with pain and cold. He had slipped in the ice. He had fired the flare with his last strength. She dragged him. It took hours. Rope, twine, branches, and stubborn will. She pulled him down to the shelter, inch by inch. She cleaned the wound, packed it, fed him broth so thin it was nearly water. He lived. His leg never healed right. It dragged when he walked, but he stayed. He built beside her after the storms passed, dug his own fire hole, raised a lean shelter connected by trench. It did not move into hers. Not then. He did not ask. She did not offer. They worked side by side. Spring came slow, but it came. Snow melted into rivulets. The earth softened. Buds appeared on the trees. Clara stood with Ruth on her hip, and Jeremiah pressed to her leg, watching the valley breathe again. Stillness settled in her chest. Not peace, but close. Others came. A woman on foot with 2 children. A man who had lost his roof. Another widow. Another family. They did not laugh at the shelter. They nodded. They understood. They dug. By summer, there were 3 shelters, then 5, then more. Dugouts carved into the hill, all facing inward. A shared fire pit, shared meals, shared silence. No one built upward. They built into the earth. The world above still stormed, still froze, still took what it wanted. But beneath it, life held on. Clara Ara taught without meaning to. How to pack snow, how to seal walls, how to listen to the ground, how to read a baby's breath in winter. Her hands still ached. Her back stayed bent. But her children grew strong. Jeremiah ran through the tunnels laughing. Ruth took her first steps in spring mud, her arms flapping like wings. Albie built a sled. Ellen brought a harmonica. The sound of laughter traveled through the earth like warmth. One day a surveyor came. Clean boots. Stiff hat. He asked questions. Clara smiled and gave him nothing. He did not return. By fall, there were 7 families. By the next spring, more than 20 people lived beneath the hill. They called it nothing. They needed no name. Years later, when storms came and passed and children grew, Clara Ara would sometimes stand at the edge of the valley and remember the day she knelt in the snow, pregnant and alone, digging through the bones of a collapsed barn. The world had not ended that day. It had gone deeper, and she had gone with it, carrying life into the ground and pulling a future back out.